It started as just another shoot day, with cameras rolling, lights glowing, and cast members trying to keep their personal lives separate from the messy drama that reality television loves to dig out. But what unfolded on set shocked everyone in the room and sent waves across social media like wildfire. Rasheeda, usually known for her controlled tone and polished composure, completely lost it in front of the cameras. The target of her rage, none other than Kendra Mendizzi's outspoken wife, who had already been rubbing people the wrong way with her unfiltered comments. Viewers expected a little shade, maybe some snide remarks, but no one could have predicted the moment Rasheeda stood up, pointed across the set, and dragged Kendra in a way that left the entire cast frozen in disbelief. "Don't play with me, Kendra. Not today. Not ever," Rasheeda snapped, her voice slicing through the tense silence. The words echoed louder than any producer's directions, louder than the background chatter. Kirk, caught in the middle as always, looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. But before he could even step in to calm things down, another bombshell dropped, this time aimed at him. Kendra wasn't about to stay quiet, and in defending herself, she exposed a side of Kirk that fans had long suspected but never had proof of. The set turned into a battlefield of accusations, confessions, and unfinished business that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. As cameras captured every explosive moment, crew members whispered behind the scenes, and other cast members exchanged wide-eyed glances. The question wasn't just who was right or wrong, it was who would survive the fallout. Fans watching the leaks and teasers online immediately took sides, some defending Rasheeda's fiery confrontation, others claiming Kendra only spoke what everyone else had been too scared to say. Meanwhile, Kirk stood at the center of the storm, with secrets unraveling that could destroy not only his marriage but also the fragile peace among the cast. And just when you thought things couldn't get any messier, whispers spread that more people were ready to step forward with receipts. What really happened on set that day? Why did Rasheeda finally snap? And what truth about Kirk left fans divided and gasping for answers? Stay tuned, because the drama you're about to witness is unlike anything you've seen before. The tension on set was so thick you could almost hear it crackle in the air. And even before Rasheeda's sharp voice cut through the room, people sensed something was about to explode. It had been building for weeks. Little whispers of disrespect, sly remarks, and smirks exchanged during confessionals that seemed harmless at first but slowly festered until it reached the boiling point. Rasheeda had tried to hold it together, keeping her usual composure, but Kendra had pushed too far. That morning had already been rough. Rasheeda came in, drained, distracted by rumors circulating online about Kirk. Rumors she had prayed were just the typical noise fans threw around for attention. But when she stepped onto set, she saw Kendra laughing in the corner, phone in hand, flashing screenshots around like trophies, and suddenly every ounce of patience she had left shattered. People gasped as Rasheeda stormed across the floor, her heels clicking like warning shots, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and betrayal. "Kendra, you think you're funny," she snapped, her finger cutting through the air. Kendra tilted her head, calm and almost amused, as if daring her to keep going. "Girl, don't come at me unless you're ready for what I got," Kendra fired back, her tone laced with venom. The crew scrambled, unsure whether to step in or let the cameras soak up every bit of the firestorm unfolding. Kirk sat frozen on the couch, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of two women's eyes, his wife seething with fury, and Kendra smirking with the kind of confidence that only comes when you're holding a weapon you know will hit its mark. "What is it, Kendra? What you waving around on that phone?" "Huh?" Rasheeda barked, her voice breaking. The cast fell silent, eyes darting from Rasheeda to Kendra, then to Kirk, whose face had turned pale. And then Kendra dropped the words that made the whole room gasp. "Don't act like you don't know. Your man been out here, and I got proof." The sentence sliced through the air like a knife. The entire set erupted into whispers and muffled screams, with phones coming out to record. Because everyone knew this wasn't just another petty argument. This was bigger. Rasheeda's hands shook as she demanded to see the phone. "You lying? You always lying to get some shine. Show me what you got then. Show me." Her voice cracked under the pressure, not just from the argument but from the fear that deep down, she already knew. Kirk shifted forward, trying to intercept, but Kendra pulled her arm back with a grin. "Nah, let her see it. Since she think I'm making this up." She scrolled and held up the screen, and even from across the room, you could see the blurred-out faces, the timestamps, the suggestive messages. Kirk's name was right there in bold text, tied to conversations that no married man should be having. Rasheeda snatched the phone, scrolling furiously, her breaths uneven, her eyes narrowing with every word she read. "Kirk, what is this?" she whispered, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Kirk stammered, his hands up like a man facing judgment. Babe, it's not what it looks like, I swear. But those words, the same tired defense fans had heard before, only made things worse. Kendra leaned back with her arms folded, satisfied, while the other cast members exchanged knowing looks. Some shook their heads in sympathy, others whispered, I knew it, as the chaos grew louder. Not what it looks like. Rasheeda shot back, her voice rising. It never what it looks like, huh, Kirk? Every time it's the same story, and I'm supposed to just keep smiling, keep pretending. I'm done with the pretending. She slammed the phone down on the couch, her eyes glassy with tears, but her rage kept her standing tall. Kendra smirked, fueling the fire, and threw in another jab. See, this the problem. You out here defending him when he don't even respect you. Everybody see it but you. Gasps filled the room again, because while the words were harsh, they carried a sting of truth that no one could ignore. Kirk tried to get up, tried to explain, but Rasheeda's hand shot up to silence him. Don't even speak. You had your chance. The silence after her words was heavier than the shouting had been. The kind of silence where everyone knows the next move could change everything. The cameras zoomed in on Kirk's face, catching the sweat, the panic, the desperation of a man trapped in his own mistakes. Fans watching at home would be screaming, rewinding, screenshotting, because this wasn't just drama, it was raw, unfiltered heartbreak unraveling right in front of them. And then, just when the dust seemed like it couldn't settle any lower, another voice chimed in from the side. It was Sierra, stepping forward, her own phone in hand. Rasheeda, you not gonna like this, but Kendra ain't the only one with receipts. The room went cold. Rasheeda spun around, her chest heaving, as Sierra held out her screen showing messages that matched the ones on Kendra's phone. The cast let out a collective gasp, some covering their mouths in shock, others clutching each other like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Kendra raised her eyebrows, almost smug, as if she had just won the biggest round of the night. Rasheeda stared, stunned, betrayed from every angle, her knees almost buckling under the weight of it. Everybody got something to say. Huh? Kirk muttered under his breath, his voice breaking, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. But it was too late. The damage was done. Rasheeda turned back to him, her eyes locked, her voice trembling but strong. You embarrassed me, Kirk. Again. In front of everybody, in front of the world, and you think I'm just supposed to forgive and forget? Not this time. The room erupted in shouts, cast members pulling Rasheeda back, others trying to calm Kirk. But the storm was already raging, unstoppable and unforgiving. And as the cameras caught every tear, every scream, every gasp, it was clear this was just the beginning of a war that would tear families apart and leave fans divided like never before. The room didn't calm down. Not even after producers begged everyone to take a breath and reset. If anything, the chaos only grew stronger, like a fire that had finally found oxygen. Rasheeda stood there trembling, her hands pressed against her face as if trying to block out what she had just seen. But her tears slipped through anyway, betraying the armor she had built for years. Fans had always seen her as unshakable, the strong one who kept it together, no matter how messy Kirk got. But this was different. The betrayal had been dragged out into the open. Not whispered about online or speculated in comments. This was undeniable. Caught in real time with receipts flashing across screens for everyone to witness. Kendra, instead of backing off, took a step closer, her voice sharp as glass. Now you see what I've been trying to tell you. I didn't make this up, Rasheeda. I don't need no storyline that bad. Your man been out here disrespecting you, and you the only one still blind to it. The words sliced at Rasheeda's pride, cutting deeper because they echoed whispers she had tried to ignore for so long. Kirk, desperate to salvage something, pushed up from the couch, reaching out like he could physically pull the moment back into his control. Rasheeda, listen to me, please. You know I wouldn't. She shoved his hand away so hard he stumbled back, and the crowd of cast members gasped again. Don't touch me, Kirk. Don't you dare. She spat, her voice rising into a trembling shout. You embarrassed me for the last time. You brought me out here, in front of everybody, knowing what you've been doing behind my back. You don't even care how it makes me look, how it breaks me, and you think I'm supposed to stand next to you and smile like nothing happened? You really think I'm that weak? Her words shook the room. Erica leaned in from the side, whispering to Sierra, she done. You can hear it in her voice, she really done this time. But Sierra wasn't so sure. We've been here before, she muttered, shaking her head. Kirk always finds a way to crawl back, and she always takes him. But this feels different. Kendra smirked, folding her arms as she delivered another blow. You know why it feels different? Because now the whole world watching. You can't sweep this under the rug no more. Everybody seeing the truth about Kirk. About y'all marriage. That was when Rasheeda snapped, her voice shaking the entire set. You think this funny, Kendra? You sitting here smiling while my marriage falling apart? You enjoying this? Huh. She lunged forward, and it took two people to hold her back. Kendra, instead of flinching, laughed bitterly. I ain't enjoying nothing, but I'm not about to be the villain because I said what everybody else too scared to say. I told you the truth. If you mad, be mad at him, not me. Kirk held his head in his hands, muttering, y'all don't even understand. Over and over, but no one was listening. The cameras caught every twitch of his face, every bead of sweat as if magnifying the image of a man unraveling under pressure. The producers whispered frantically into their headsets, trying to figure out if they should cut the scene or let it roll. But the truth was, this was ratings gold, the kind of unscripted explosion that people would be talking about for weeks. Then, out of nowhere, Yandi stepped in, her voice steady but stern. All right, enough. This ain't about proving points or tearing each other down for cameras. Rasheeda hurting right now. And Kirk, you need to face what you've done instead of letting Kendra and Sierra air it out for you. The room went quiet for a second, the weight of her words hitting hard. But Kirk shook his head, deflecting once again. It's not even like that, Yandi. They twisting things. Messages don't mean nothing, y'all blowing it up for TV. That excuse only made things worse. Kendra threw her arms up dramatically, her laughter cutting through the air. Messages don't mean nothing. Boy, you delusional. These ain't no group texts about lunch. These messages got late nights, locations, and things a married man ain't supposed to be saying. Stop playing with everybody intelligence. The cast gasped, some yelling in agreement, others shaking their heads at how sloppy Kirk had been. Rasheeda, her voice almost breaking into a scream, turned on him again. Do you even realize what you lost? What you throwing away? Our family, our kids, everything we built. And for what? For some attention? Some quick thrill? You selfish, Kirk. You always been selfish, and I'm tired of it. She collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with sobs. And Erica rushed to comfort her, holding her close while glaring at Kirk like he was the enemy of the entire show. Fans online would later flood timelines with clips, taking sides as hashtags trended in minutes. Some sided with Rasheeda, praising her strength and calling her a queen for finally standing up to Kirk. Others sided with Kendra, arguing that she wasn't the villain but the truth-teller, exposing a man who had been hiding behind lies for too long. And then there were the ones who still defended Kirk, claiming the drama was exaggerated for cameras, that he didn't deserve to be crucified so publicly. But inside that studio, there were no blurred lines, no divided opinions. Everyone could see the truth plain as day, and it was ugly. Just when it felt like things couldn't go any further, Kirk's phone buzzed on the couch. The sound pierced through the silence like a gunshot, and everyone froze. Rasheeda's head snapped toward it, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Slowly, almost theatrically, Kendra leaned down, picked up the phone, and read the notification aloud. Oh wow. Another message. He really don't quit, huh? Gasps filled the air as Rasheeda lunged for the phone, her face twisting with rage. And the cameras caught the exact moment the last shred of her patience burned away. Whatever was in that message, whatever name flashed on the screen, was about to change everything all over again. Rasheeda's fingers closed around the phone before Kirk could snatch it back. And the room froze as she read the notification out loud, her voice breaking with disbelief. Who is Tasha Kirk? Who is she? The name hung in the air like poison. Cast members gasped, hands flew to mouths, and even the crew exchanged shocked glances behind the cameras. Kirk stuttered, reaching out like he could physically erase the words from her lips. It's not like that, Rasheeda. I swear. You don't even. But Rasheeda cut him off with a scream, so sharp it made the walls shake. Don't you dare tell me it's not like that. It's always not like that. You think I'm stupid? You think I'm blind? Her voice echoed across the set, raw and trembling, and the weight of years of betrayal poured into every word. Kendra, still leaning against the edge of the couch, with her arms crossed, smirked like she had been waiting for this moment. See? This what I've been saying. He don't change. Every season it's something new. Every time she defending him, and he out here texting women like he's single. How many times you gonna let him play you, Rasheeda? The jab cut deep, and Rasheeda's face crumpled as though the words themselves had struck her. Erica rushed to her side again, whispering, don't listen to her, sis. You stronger than this. But Rasheeda pushed her away, standing tall despite her tears. No, let her talk. Let her say it, because maybe I need to hear it out loud. Maybe I need to finally admit that everybody been right about you, Kirk. Everybody but me. The cameras zoomed in on Kirk's face, drenched in sweat, his eyes darting like a man trapped in his own lies. "Babe, please. It's not what you think," he whispered desperately. But nobody bought it anymore. The audience at home would be yelling at their screens, replaying the moment over and over, debating who Tasha really was. But inside that room, the damage was irreversible. Sierra shook her head, muttering under her breath, "This man done ruined his whole legacy. Ain't no coming back from this one." Suddenly, the phone buzzed again in Rasheeda's hand. Another message, right there, flashing bold on the screen. "Last night was everything. Can't wait to see you again tonight." Gasps exploded around the room as Rasheeda staggered backward, clutching her chest like the words had punched the air out of her. "You still seeing her?" she cried, her voice cracking. "While you sitting up in my face, telling me I'm the only one, you still out here sneaking around?" She hurled the phone at the wall, the crash ringing through the studio as producers scrambled to calm the chaos. Kirk raised his voice for the first time, snapping at Kendra. "Why you even showing her this? You don't care about her, you just wanted to embarrass me." Kendra shot back without hesitation. "Embarrass you? Boy, you embarrass yourself. You did this, not me. Don't blame me because your wife finally seeing you for what you really are." The tension grew unbearable, and just when it seemed like Rasheeda was about to storm out, Yandi stepped in again, her tone sharp and commanding. "Enough. Both of y'all stop. This ain't about proving points anymore. This about a family being torn apart." But Rasheeda shook her head, her voice trembling but fierce. "No, Yandi. This about me being made a fool of, again and again. I gave this man everything. I built with him. I stood by him when nobody else would, and this is how he repays me. By sneaking around, by lying to my face. I can't take it anymore. I can't." Her words silenced the room. Even Kendra, smug as she was, softened for a moment, her smirk fading as she realized how broken Rasheeda really was. The cameras caught the tears sliding down Rasheeda's cheeks, her hands trembling as she wiped them away. Fans would later call it one of the rawest, most unfiltered moments reality TV had ever captured. And then came the twist nobody saw coming. From the corner of the set, Mendices cleared his throat, stepping forward with a grave look on his face. "I wasn't gonna say nothing," he began, the weight in his voice pulling everyone's attention. "But Kirk, you've been lying to more than just Rasheeda. You've been lying to all of us." The room froze, eyes darting to Kirk, who visibly flinched. "What you talking about, man?" Kirk muttered, his tone nervous. Mendices shook his head slowly, pulling out his own phone. "I got messages too, and they ain't just from no Tasha." The crowd erupted into chaos again, shouts bouncing off the walls, fans in the live audience screaming in disbelief. Rasheeda's face went pale, her body trembling as if bracing for another blow. Kirk tried to lunge for Mendices, but the cast held him back, their voices overlapping in confusion and outrage. Erica shouted, "Oh my God, what is happening right now?" While Sierra gasped, "He'd been playing everybody." The producers didn't even try to stop it anymore. This was the kind of drama that would break the internet. Rasheeda's voice cracked as she cried out, "Tell me the truth. Kirk, tell me right now before somebody else does it for you. Who else is there?" The silence that followed was deafening, the kind of silence that crushes everything in its path. Kirk's eyes darted between Rasheeda, Mendices, and the cameras, his lips trembling but no words coming out. And in that heavy pause, everyone knew there was more, so much more, and it was about to come crashing down on all of them. The pause stretched so long it felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for Kirk to either confess or explode. Rasheeda stood there shaking, her eyes red and glassy, but her voice cut like steel when she pressed again. "Say it, Kirk. Say it right here, in front of everybody. Who else?" The cameras zoomed in tight, catching every twitch of his mouth, every flicker of guilt in his eyes. Fans watching later would replay this moment over and over, dissecting the silence, debating if it was fear, shame, or pure arrogance keeping him from speaking. Finally, Kirk muttered, "It ain't even like that," but his voice cracked, betraying him before he even finished the sentence. Mendices stepped closer, his phone raised like a weapon. "Stop lying, Kirk. These ain't no rumors, this is fact. You out here talking to more than one woman, and one of them, she not just anybody." The crowd gasped, the cast members yelling out, all at once, voices overlapping until producers were screaming into their headsets to let the cameras roll. Rasheeda staggered back as if the weight of his words had shoved her. "Not just anybody. Who is she? Who?" she screamed, her voice breaking into a sob. Mendices' eyes darted toward the corner of the set, and every head in the room turned at once. That's when Carly read, who had been unusually quiet all day, finally stepped forward. Her face was unreadable, but her silence said more than words. The room erupted, people shouting, phones whipping out, gasps so loud they nearly drowned out the sound of Rasheeda's heart breaking in real time. "Carly," Rasheeda whispered, her voice thin, her chest heaving like she couldn't breathe. Kirk's head dropped, his silence damning him more than any words could. Carly lifted her chin, her tone calm but sharp as a blade. "Don't look at me like that, Rasheeda. You think I wanted this to come out like this? You think I wanted to be the one to destroy you? No, but he ain't the man you think he is. He ain't been that man for a long time." The shock waves hit like a bomb. Erica clapped her hand over her mouth. Kendra let out a dramatic laugh of disbelief. And Yandy yelled out, "Oh my God, this is insane." The set was chaos, and Rasheeda's entire body seemed to crumble in slow motion. "You," she whispered, pointing a trembling finger at Carly. "You, out of everybody? After everything we've been through, after everything I confided in you, you." Her voice cracked, and the tears came hard, unstoppable. "You sat with me. You laughed with me. You called yourself my friend, and all the while you were creeping with him. How could you do this to me? Carly, how could you?" Carly didn't flinch. Her voice was low, steady, and almost cold. "Because your man came to me. Because he was already gone long before I ever stepped in. You blame me, but the truth is, he'd been betraying you, Rasheeda. I'm just the one you finally found out about." Gasps filled the room again, some cast members yelling "That's foul," while others muttered, "I knew it," under their breath. Kendra, enjoying the spectacle, clapped her hands together and shouted, "This the truth y'all didn't want to hear. Now it's out. Now everybody know who Kirk really is." Rasheeda's sobs turned into screams, her rage bubbling over as she lunged forward, shoving chairs and knocking over props while producers tried to contain her. "You ruined me, Kirk. You ruined me," she shouted, her voice breaking into raw, guttural cries. Kirk reached out, his own voice desperate. "Babe, listen to me. It didn't mean nothing. It was a mistake." But that only sent Rasheeda into another spiral. A mistake. A mistake that lasted how long? "Kirk, weeks, months, years. Tell me how long you've been lying in my face, laying in my bed, then running off to her. You disgust me." The cameras caught every tear streaming down her face, every shake of her body as Erica and Yandy tried to hold her upright. Fans watching at home would later flood the internet with split-screen edits. Rasheeda's heartbreak on one side and Kirk's guilty silence on the other, captions reading the moment everything ended. But the drama wasn't finished. Just as producers tried to calm things, Carly dropped another bombshell, her voice cutting through the noise like lightning. "And she not the only one, Rasheeda, there's more. Kirk been creeping with women you don't even know about, and one of them, she carrying his baby." The room exploded in pandemonium. People screamed, others shouted what, at the top of their lungs, and Rasheeda collapsed into Erica's arms, her cries muffled but good. "No, no, not again, not again," she sobbed, her voice raw. Kirk held his head in his hands, muttering "Oh my God" over and over as the cast swarmed with questions, accusations, and pure disbelief. Kendra's smug grin widened, her voice sharp as she declared, "See, y'all thought I was messy, but I was right. I've been right this whole time. Kirk is exposed, and now he can't hide behind Rasheeda no more." Fans online would later say this was the most shocking twist in franchise history. A moment that shattered alliances, friendships, and marriages in one blow. And as the dust settled, as Rasheeda wept and Kirk stood defeated, the cameras zoomed in for the final image of the scene, a broken woman staring at the man she had given her life to, realizing she no longer knew who he was, while the world watched, divided, shocked, and hungry for what would happen next. The night carried a weight that pressed against the silence, the kind of silence that does not soothe but thickens the air, making every breath heavier than the last. And within that silence lay the remnants of voices, arguments, promises, and regrets that had carved themselves into the very walls of the house, as if the bricks themselves had absorbed the history and were unwilling to let it go. And she sat by the dim light of the lamp, staring at the faint reflection of her own tired face on the window pane, wondering whether she was looking at herself or some stranger who had grown inside her skin over the years. For the lines etched along her eyes did not only belong to time but to choices, sacrifices, and betrayals she could not untangle anymore. And in that moment she thought of the beginning, the laughter, the vacations, the soft words whispered across bedsheets when the world outside did not matter, and how those very same words outside did not matter, and how those very same words had grown sharp over time, turned into accusations, questions, and finally silence. the kind of silence that screamed louder than any fight. And she wondered if love was meant to end like this, not with fire or storm, but with the slow erosion of warmth until two people became shadows passing each other in the same room, breathing the same air yet living on entirely separate islands that could not be bridged anymore. And she remembered how once she believed vacations were the cure, that if they ran away together, left behind the noise of work, family obligations, maybe they would rediscover what they had lost. Maybe they would find each other again in the sunsets, the beaches, the crowded streets of foreign cities where no one knew their names. But what vacations revealed was not healing but distance, because even as they stood beneath waterfalls or watched lanterns rise into night skies, their hands brushed but never clasped, their words fell but never landed, and she saw more clearly in those stolen moments away from routine, that what had been broken was not from the outside but from within, and no ocean could mend what the heart refused to hold. Yet she clung to the memories because they were the only proof that once upon a time there had been something worth saving, something worth burning for, and she feared that if she let go of those memories, then she would be left with nothing but the hollow truth that all along they had only been pretending. And as she thought of this, her eyes wandered across the room, falling on his jacket carelessly draped across the chair, his scent still clinging faintly to the fabric, and she hated herself for missing it, for craving even the smallest reminder of the man she had once known, though she could not find him anymore in the man who now slept in the other room, separated not by walls but by walls of silence built higher and thicker with every passing day. And she pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, closing her eyes as if by shutting out the world she could travel back to the time when he looked at her as though she was the only anchor he had in this life. But the moments slipped, always slipping, and she realized that memory was a cruel companion, giving comfort with one hand and pain with the other, and she could not decide which side weighed heavier on her tonight, the longing or the loss. And outside, the wind stirred, rattling the branches, carrying with it the faint smell of rain that had not yet fallen, and it felt like the sky, too, was holding back, trembling at the edge of release, mirroring the way she held herself back from crumbling, because there was still a part of her that believed breaking in front of him would give him power, that showing the depth of her hurt would not heal but widen the rift. So she kept it tucked in, every tear, every scream, every plea swallowed down until her chest ached with the weight of unsaid words, and she wondered if he felt any of it, if the silence pressed on him too, or if he had already escaped, not with his body but with his heart. And perhaps that was the cruelest truth, that sometimes departure does not come with bags packed or doors slammed, but with the quiet withdrawing of love, so subtle that by the time you notice it, it has already been gone for years. And she sat there until the lamp flickered, until her own reflection blurred, until the sound of his distant footsteps in the hallway reminded her that despite everything, they still shared this house, this space, this unfinished story. Though she no longer knew if they were characters moving toward reconciliation or strangers trapped in the same chapter, unable to turn the page, and as she rose slowly, her legs unsteady not from sleep but from exhaustion of spirit, she thought about whether tomorrow would bring a change or simply more of the same, and whether she still had the strength to hope for anything at all. For hope itself had begun to feel like a punishment, promising her things that reality refused to deliver. And as she walked toward the hallway, the floor creaked beneath her steps, a sound so small, yet so loud in the heavy night. And when she paused outside his door, she could hear the faint rustle of him turning in bed, restless, perhaps haunted by dreams or perhaps by the same silence that haunted her. And she placed her hand lightly against the wood, not knocking, not speaking, just letting her palm rest there, as though the barrier between them could feel the weight of what she could not say. And for a fleeting second, she wished he would rise, open the door, look at her not with the cold distance he carried now but with the softness she still remembered. But no sound came, no door opened, and she let her hand fall, retreating back into her own room, where the bed felt both too big and too small. Too big because it lacked warmth, too small because it held her tightly in the cage of her own thoughts. And as she lay down, she thought of the years ahead, whether they would stretch like this, each day mirroring the last, or whether one day the silence would finally break, not with reconciliation but with departure. And she shivered though the air was not cold, because uncertainty has a way of chilling the bones more than any winter wind, and her eyes burned but refused to close, as if staying awake was the only way to guard herself from the dreams that might remind her of everything she had lost. And the night dragged on, unkind, unending, as if mocking her with its refusal to release her into morning. And she realized that sometimes the hardest part is not the storm itself but the waiting, the endless waiting for something to change. Even when deep down you know it never will, yet still you wait. Because what else is there left to do but hold on to a hope that keeps slipping further away? And as dawn finally crept in, faint and pale, she understood that another day had begun. But inside her, the night had never ended. The night carried a weight that pressed against the silence. The kind of silence that does not soothe but thickens the air, making every breath heavier than the last. And within that silence lay the remnants of voices, arguments, promises, and regrets that had carved themselves into the very walls of the house, as if the bricks themselves had absorbed the history and were unwilling to let it go. And she sat by the dim light of the lamp, staring at the faint reflection of her own tired face on the windowpane, wondering whether she was looking at herself or some stranger who had grown inside her skin over the years. For the lines etched along her eyes did not only belong to time but to choices, sacrifices, and betrayals she could not untangle anymore. And in that moment she thought of the beginning, the laughter, the vacations, the soft words whispered across bedsheets when the world outside did not matter, and how those very same words had grown sharp over time, turned into accusations, questions, and finally silence. The kind of silence that screamed louder than any fight. And she wondered if love was meant to end like this, not with fire or storm but with the slow erosion of warmth until two people became shadows passing each other in the same room, breathing the same air yet living on entirely separate islands that could not be bridged anymore. And she remembered how once she believed vacations were the cure, that if they ran away together, left behind the noise of work, family obligations, maybe they would rediscover what they had lost. Maybe they would find each other again in the sunsets, the beaches, the crowded streets of foreign cities where no one knew their names. But what vacations revealed was not healing but distance, because even as they stood beneath waterfalls or watched lanterns rise into night skies, their hands brushed but never clasped, their words fell but never landed, and she saw more clearly in those stolen moments away from routine, that what had been broken was not from the outside but from within, and no ocean could mend what the heart refused to hold. Yet she clung to the memories because they were the only proof that once upon a time there had been something worth saving, something worth burning for, and she feared that if she let go of those memories, then she would be left with nothing but the hollow truth that all along they had only been pretending. And as she thought of this, her eyes wandered across the room, falling on his jacket carelessly draped across the chair, his scent still clinging faintly to the fabric, and she hated herself for missing it, for craving even the smallest reminder of the man she had once known, though she could not find him anymore in the man who now slept in the other room, separated not by walls but by walls of silence built higher and thicker with every passing day. And she pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, closing her eyes as if by shutting out the world, she could travel back to the time when he looked at her as though she was the only anchor he had in this life. But the moment slipped, always slipping, and she realized that memory was a cruel companion, giving comfort with one hand and pain with the other, and she could not decide which side weighed heavier on her tonight, the longing or the loss. And outside, the wind stirred, rattling the branches, carrying with it the faint smell of rain that had not yet fallen, and it felt like the sky, too, was holding back, trembling at the edge of release, mirroring the way she held herself back from crumbling, because there was still a part of her that believed breaking in front of him would give him power, that showing the depth of her hurt would not heal but widen the rift. So she kept it tucked in, every tear, every scream, every plea swallowed down until her chest ached with the weight of unsaid words, and she wondered if he felt any of it, if the silence pressed on him too, or if he had already escaped, not with his body but with his heart. And perhaps that was the cruelest truth, that sometimes departure does not come with bags packed or doors slammed, but with the quiet withdrawing of love, so subtle that by the time you notice it, it has already been gone for years. And she sat there until the lamp flickered, until her own reflection blurred, until the sound of his distant footsteps in the hallway reminded her that despite everything they still shared this house, this space, this unfinished story. Though she no longer knew if they were characters moving toward reconciliation or strangers trapped in the same chapter, unable to turn the page. And as she rose slowly, her legs unsteady, not from sleep but from exhaustion of spirit, she thought about whether tomorrow would bring a change or simply more of the same, and whether she still had the strength to hope for anything at all, for hope itself had begun to feel like a punishment, promising her things that reality refused to deliver. And as she walked toward the hallway, the floor creaked beneath her steps, a sound so small yet so loud in the heavy night, and when she paused outside his door she could hear the faint rustle of him turning in bed, restless, perhaps haunted by dreams or perhaps by the same silence that haunted her. And she placed her hand lightly against the wood, not knocking, not speaking, just letting her palm rest there as though the barrier between them could feel the weight of what she could not say. And for a fleeting second, she wished he would rise, open the door, look at her not with the cold distance he carried now but with the softness she still remembered. But no sound came, no door opened, and she let her hand fall, retreating back into her own room, where the bed felt both too big and too small. Too big because it lacked warmth, too small because it held her tightly in the cage of her own thoughts. And as she lay down, she thought of the years ahead, whether they would stretch like this, each day mirroring the last, or whether one day the silence would finally break, not with reconciliation but with departure. And she shivered, though the air was not cold, because uncertainty has a way of chilling the bones more than any winter wind, and her eyes burned but refused to close, as if staying awake was the only way to guard herself from the dreams that might remind her of everything she had lost. And the night dragged on, unkind, unending, as if mocking her with its refusal to release her into morning. And she realized that sometimes the hardest part is not the storm itself but the waiting, the endless waiting for something to change, even when deep down you know it never will, yet still you wait, because what else is there left to do but hold on to a hope that keeps slipping further away? And as dawn finally crept in, faint and pale, she understood that another day had begun. But inside her the night had never ended. The morning light seeped into the room like an intruder, not warm or comforting but pale and sharp, exposing everything she wished would stay hidden: the scattered books on the floor, the half-drunk glass of water that had been sitting for days, the untouched scarf he had once given her folded at the corner of the bed like a memory she could not bring herself to throw away. And as she turned her face into the pillow, she felt the ache of another day she had no strength to carry. Yet life did not ask for her strength, it demanded it, pulling her out of bed, pushing her feet against the cold floorboards, reminding her that even when hearts collapse, routines do not. And she dressed slowly, her hands moving without thought, brushing her hair, buttoning her blouse, each action mechanical, stripped of intention. And yet, beneath that mechanical surface lay the constant whisper of questions, unending, gnawing at her, asking how did we get here? When did the laughter fade? When did the rooms of this house grow so hollow? And why am I still here, if staying means drowning in silence? And she carried those questions with her into the kitchen where the faint smell of coffee lingered, the kind he brewed every morning, as though routine could cover what words no longer did. And she stood there watching the steam rise from the mug he had left on the counter, a small gesture that could have meant habit or could have meant care, but she could not tell the difference anymore. And she lifted the mug, the warmth seeping into her hands, burning slightly, reminding her that at least something could still touch her skin with intensity, unlike his gaze which now passed over her as though she were a shadow. And she sat at the table, sipping slowly, tasting not the coffee but the memories that came with it. Mornings in the early years when he would tease her about always needing sugar, when they would linger over breakfast even if it made them late, when love was not something questioned but simply lived. And the ache grew sharper because those mornings felt like another lifetime, like they had belonged to two other people, strangers she could not reconcile with who they were now. And she closed her eyes, wishing, foolishly wishing, that when she opened them she would be back there, the sound of his laughter filling the room, his hand reaching for hers across the table. But when she opened them, it was only the clink of the spoon against ceramic, only the empty chair opposite her, only the silence pressing down heavier than ever. And she wondered if he too sat somewhere in the house with his own ghosts, if he too remembered, or if his heart had already moved past it all, if he had learned to live without her even as they still shared the same roof. And the thought of it hollowed her further, because there is a special kind of pain in realizing you are mourning a love that the other has already buried. And she wanted to scream, to slam the mug down, to demand answers, to shake the silence until it shattered, but instead she just sat there, frozen in the same stillness that had defined them for so long. And after a while, she rose, washed the mug, set it back on the shelf as though nothing had happened, because in their world now everything was about appearances, about going through motions, about pretending the house was not collapsing from the inside out. And as she moved through the rooms, she thought of the vacations again, the desperate attempts to salvage what was already breaking, how she had planned them meticulously, each destination chosen not for the sights but for the chance of closeness, hoping that if they were surrounded by beauty, it would reflect back into their hearts. But beauty had only highlighted the cracks, every sunset turning into silence, every city street walked side by side but worlds apart. And the cruelest part was that to anyone looking from the outside they would have appeared happy, two people holding hands under the glow of foreign lights, smiling for photographs that even now lay tucked away in albums like lies pressed between pages. And she could not bear to look at them anymore, because each smile felt like betrayal. Each captured moment a reminder that she had been performing happiness even as she felt herself slipping away inside. And as the day stretched on, as she moved through chores and lists and meaningless tasks, her mind kept circling back to the same point, that perhaps love does not end in flames but in the erosion of small things. In the mornings where no words are spoken, in the nights where no touch is offered, in the accumulation of silences that grow so heavy they suffocate whatever spark once lived. And she thought of all the things she had not said, the times she had bitten back her truth because she feared it would push him further away, not realizing that silence itself was the greatest distance, and she wanted to go to him now, to stand in front of him and say everything, every pain, every memory, everything, every pain, every memory, every desperate hope, to lay it bare and let the pieces fall where they may. But fear rooted her, fear of rejection, fear of indifference, fear that she would pour out her soul and he would look at her with the same emptiness that already haunted his eyes. And so she stayed still, moving only in her mind, rehearsing words she would never speak, and outside the day shifted, the light grew warmer, but it did not touch her. She remained in the dimness of her own thoughts, until evening crept in, and with it the same tension that always thickened the air when they were both home, present but absent, together but apart. And she heard his footsteps in the hall again, steady, familiar, yet carrying no meaning, and for a brief second she thought he might stop. He might step into the kitchen where she sat. He might break the silence with something, anything. But the footsteps passed. The moment slipped, and she exhaled a breath she had not realized she was holding. And it was then she understood something that made her chest ache with clarity, that sometimes love does not die suddenly but quietly, leaving behind not rage or betrayal but emptiness. And the hardest part of emptiness is that it gives you nothing to fight, nothing to hold against the other, nothing to heal. It only stretches inside you, wider each day, until you are not sure if what you miss is them or the person you once were when love was alive. And as night settled once more, she sat in the same spot, the circle repeating, the silence deepening, and she felt herself dissolving into it, piece by piece, until she wondered how long before there would be nothing left of her at all, only a shell, moving through the motions of a life that had long since ceased to be hers. And yet even as the despair pressed on her, even as tears finally slipped free, she found herself whispering into the dark, not a scream, not a demand, just a whisper, fragile and breaking, asking the question that had haunted her all along. Do you still see me? Do you still remember who we were? Do you even want to try? And though no answer came, though only silence pressed back, the question lingered in the air. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel its weight, to let it rest not only in her chest but in the space between them, a question left hanging, waiting, daring the night to deliver something more than emptiness, even if it never would. The night stretched endlessly, pressing against the walls of the house like an unwelcome guest, heavy and suffocating, and she lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards as though the house itself was restless, her mind running in circles that refused to quiet, circling back again and again to the same ache, the same longing, the same unspoken words that burned her throat but never found air. And as she turned onto her side, staring into the dim outline of furniture barely visible in the half-light, she thought of the years they had shared, the laughter that had once been so easy, the little rituals that once stitched their lives together, rituals now abandoned, forgotten like relics of another world. And she wondered if he to lay awake in another room, haunted by the same memories, or if he had already built new walls around his heart, walls so tall she could no longer reach him. And the thought of it was unbearable, because it meant she was mourning something alone, carrying grief that was not even acknowledged by the one who should have felt it most. And she clenched her fists into the sheets, wishing she could shake him, wake him, force him to remember what they had been. But she remained frozen, trapped by her own fear, fear of rejection, fear of indifference, fear that even if she bared her soul, he would only look at her with that distant, unreadable expression that had become his shield. And so she lay still, tears soaking silently into the pillow, her body trembling not from cold but from the exhaustion of carrying unspoken pain. And when dawn finally broke, spilling pale light across the room, she rose not because she felt rested but because she could not stand the weight of lying there any longer. And she moved through the motions of the morning like a ghost, her hands steady but her heart unraveling, pouring coffee into mugs that were barely touched, setting plates that remained half full. And when he walked in, his face shadowed with sleep, his movements quiet, she watched him with an intensity that burned, waiting for a sign, a glance, a word that might bridge the gap. But his eyes skimmed past her, landing on the mail stacked neatly on the counter, on the phone, buzzing faintly in his hand, and she swallowed hard, feeling the sharp sting of invisibility, the realization that she had become a background fixture in his life, always present but no longer seen, and the cruelty of it cut deeper than any argument ever could, because anger at least meant passion, meant engagement, but this absence, this hollow space between them, felt like a slow erasure, as though she were disappearing piece by piece in front of his eyes and he did not even notice. And she wanted to scream, to break something, to force him to feel the storm raging inside her, but instead, she bit her lip until it hurt, kept her voice steady when she asked about his plans for the day, received only vague answers in return, and watched him leave again, his footsteps fading into silence, leaving her alone once more in the echo of what used to be. And as the door closed, she pressed her hand against her chest, as though she could hold herself together by force, as though pressing hard enough could stop the cracks from spreading. But the truth was undeniable: what they had was slipping beyond her grasp, and she did not know if there was any way to claw it back. And so the hours dragged on, the day unfolding like countless ones before, filled with tasks and routines that disguised the emptiness. And yet, beneath it all, the same current of despair pulled at her, reminding her that she was running out of time, that one day soon she might wake up and find there was nothing left to fight for, no ember left to coax back into flame. And the thought chilled her even as the sun warmed the earth outside. And by evening, when he returned, when they sat again in the same house, strangers bound by memory, she felt the question rise once more inside her, heavy and insistent, demanding to be spoken. Do you still love me? Do you even want this anymore? But again the words lodged in her throat, trapped by fear, and instead she asked about his day, received half-hearted replies, and the silence settled thicker than before, wrapping around them like a shroud, suffocating and unrelenting. And when night returned, she found herself back in the same restless cycle, lying awake in the dark, her heart pounding with questions unanswered, her mind replaying every detail of their unraveling, wondering if perhaps love is not always stolen by betrayal or destroyed by cruelty, but simply fades, quietly, unnoticed, until one day you realize you are holding ashes where once there was fire. And she thought of the vacations again, those desperate attempts to reclaim something already lost, how she had smiled for photographs with a hollow heart, how she had laughed at jokes that no longer touched her, how she had held his hand under foreign skies praying for warmth that never came, and she hated herself for the pretending, for the performance, for the way she had tried to convince herself that proximity could be mistaken for closeness, that smiles could substitute for connection. But now, in the darkness of her own room, she could not pretend anymore. She could not deny the truth that pressed heavy on her chest, that they were two people bound not by love but by habit, not by passion but by history, and she did not know how much longer she could live in the shadows of what they once were. And as sleep finally pulled her under, it was not with peace but with the sharp ache of knowing tomorrow would bring the same silence, the same distance, unless something changed, unless she found the courage to speak, to demand, to break the cycle, even if it meant shattering the fragile peace they clung to, because sometimes silence is more destructive than any fight, and sometimes the only way to save something is to risk losing it entirely. And when the next day dawned, she felt the weight of that decision pressing harder, not yet spoken but alive inside her chest, like a pulse, because she knew she could not go on like this, drifting in silence, watching herself vanish while he remained unreachable. And as she moved through the early hours, the quiet house surrounding her like a mirror of her own emptiness, she rehearsed the words again and again, shaping them in her mind, testing their edges, imagining his reaction, sometimes cold, sometimes dismissive, sometimes unexpectedly tender, and each version left her trembling but determined, because the fear of speaking was now outweighed by the fear of never being heard at all. And when he entered the kitchen with that familiar tired look, scrolling through his phone, barely glancing her way, she felt the moment rising, the tide of years and silence cresting all at once, and she set her mug down with a sharp sound that made him look up, startled, and in that small opening she saw her chance, her breath catching as the words spilled before she could stop them. Do you even see me anymore? Do you even want this? Do you realize how far we've drifted? And the questions tumbled out, raw, breaking the silence that had strangled her for so long. And for a second he just stared, his eyes wide, his mouth opening then closing, and the pause stretched like eternity, making her regret every word, until finally he spoke, his voice low, almost broken. I thought you didn't want to know. I thought you had already given up. And she froze because the admission cut deep but also cracked something open, revealing that beneath his distance there had been fear too, fear that mirrored her own. And suddenly, the room was heavy, not just with pain but with possibility. The possibility that perhaps silence had not killed them yet, that perhaps there was still something to salvage. And as he set his phone down, finally meeting her eyes without that guarded distance, she felt the years of unsaid words pressing to the surface, ready to pour out. And they began to speak, halting at first, stumbling, but real, confessing the emptiness, the loneliness, the resentment, but also the lingering memories, the fragments of love that had not entirely died. And the conversation stretched on, raw and messy, their voices sometimes breaking, sometimes rising in anger, sometimes softening with the weight of vulnerability. And it was not neat, it was not easy, but it was real, more real than anything they had shared in years. And though the pain was sharp, though the wounds bled openly between them, there was also relief, a strange fragile relief in finally breaking the silence, in finally admitting the truth instead of suffocating under it. And as hours slipped by, they found themselves not with solutions, not with a clear path forward, but with the undeniable recognition that they were both still here, both still aching, both still tethered to something neither had been ready to fully bury. And that recognition alone was enough to light a spark, faint but visible, flickering in the ashes, reminding them that love does not always die with silence, that sometimes it waits, hidden, bruised but not gone, waiting for the courage to speak, waiting for the risk of vulnerability, waiting for the moment when two people decide that even broken things are worth mending. And as evening came, and they sat in the quiet again, it was no longer the suffocating silence of before, but a softer one, charged with the weight of what had been spoken, filled with the fragile hope of what might still be possible. And she felt her chest loosen for the first time in months, not because everything was fixed, but because at last, the truth was no longer hers to carry alone. And when he reached across the table, hesitantly, his fingers brushing hers, she did not pull away. She let the contact linger, small but powerful, like the first crack of light after a long night. And though doubt still whispered, though fear still lingered, she held on to that moment, that fragile thread, because sometimes love survives not in grand gestures or perfect answers but in the willingness to face the darkness together, to choose each other even when it would be easier to walk away. And as night settled once more, she lay awake again, but this time her heart beat not with despair but with the trembling possibility of change, of renewal, of love finding its way back through the rubble. And she knew the road would be hard, that words alone would not heal years of silence, but she also knew that something had shifted, something had broken open. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a future worth fighting for. Under the soft haze of the dimly lit evening, when the villa stood quieter than usual and the lingering fragrance of salt water clung to the warm air drifting in from the sea, the story began to stretch itself into even more tangled knots of emotion, where every heartbeat carried an echo of longing, guilt, love, and confrontation, as if the walls themselves were struggling to contain the intensity of what was unraveling. Jasmine, having now fully stepped into the eye of this storm, felt the weight of her own choices pressing against her chest like an unshakable shadow. Because even though Kirk's nearness gave her a sense of forbidden warmth and Rasheeda's collapse earlier still replayed in flashes before her eyes, she was caught between two worlds, one where desire danced recklessly, uncaring of consequence, and another where loyalty, family, and a woman's dignity demanded to be remembered. Yet Kirk, restless and torn, sat across from her in the silence of that living room, his face unreadable but his eyes alive with 1,000 unspoken confessions. And though the night had wrapped the villa in darkness, the sparks of their entangled truth burned brighter than ever. Rasheeda, meanwhile, had not been silenced by her faintings. Instead, she had returned stronger, her will sharpened, her pride heavier, her words like sharpened blades waiting to cut through the layers of betrayal. And she reminded herself that she was not a woman easily broken, that she had built too much, stood through too many storms, and sacrificed too deeply to now surrender to tears. And so, as the waves crashed just outside, her voice broke the stillness of the villa like a thunderclap, demanding answers not just from Kirk but from Jasmine too, her questions raw, her pain bleeding through her tone, each syllable carrying the sting of years of devotion crumbling in the face of treachery. And Jasmine, though shaken, did not retreat, for she too had reached a point where silence felt heavier than confession, where hiding seemed weaker than stepping into the fire. And so the air between them thickened with tension, words spilling, tears rising, voices raising, and yet beneath it all, love still lingered like an unwelcome guest, complicated, uninvited, impossible to push away. And as the night deepened, what unfolded was not a simple confrontation, but a war of hearts, where Kirk's guilt battled with his desire, where Rasheeda's anger wrestled with her aching love for the man who had betrayed her, and where Jasmine's resolve collided with the vulnerability she had tried so long to hide. And all the while, the villa bore witness, its walls absorbing the chaos of broken trust and fragile hope, until the line between villain and victim blurred, until truth and lies intertwined, until every word spoken seemed both a wound and a cure. And though the hour grew late, none of them could step away, because some stories demand to be lived fully, no matter how much they burn. And this was one of them, stretching far beyond forgiveness, beyond passion, into the raw essence of what it means to love, to lose, to fight, and to endure. The set was still buzzing from the storm that had already swept through, but as the cameras kept rolling and the lights stayed hot on the faces of Rasheeda, Kendra, and Kirk, the tension only built higher, spilling over in ways no one expected, because just when people thought the worst of the blow-ups had already happened, Rasheeda leaned back in her chair, her eyes locked on Kirk with the kind of glare that could pierce through armor, and she snapped, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you can just play both sides like this? You think you can smile in my face and then let her disrespect me on camera, in front of everybody?" While Kendra, sitting just a few feet away, shook her head and muttered under her breath, "Here she goes again," loud enough for Rasheeda to catch it, which sent the room into another spin of gasps and shocked whispers, because no one could believe Kendra had the nerve to throw shade when the wounds were still raw. And Kirk, caught between the two women who now seemed determined to tear each other apart, raised his hands in a weak attempt at peace, saying, "Y'all, this is getting out of control. This ain't what we here for." But his words were drowned out by Rasheeda slamming her palm on the table and shouting, "Out of control. Kirk, you let shouting. Out of control. Kirk, you let it get here, you let it happen. Because you can't stand up like a man and tell her to respect me." While the producers backstage whispered frantically into their headsets, debating whether to cut the scene or let it run because they knew the raw drama was gold. And even the crew members who had been trained to keep straight faces couldn't hide their wide eyes as Rasheeda turned fully toward Kendra, her earrings swaying with each sharp tilt of her head, and hissed, "You wanted my spot so bad. You wanted to walk in like you earned it. But let me tell you something, baby, you ain't built for this. You ain't built for me," which made Kendra finally explode, standing up and pointing her finger inches from Rasheeda's face, shouting, "Stop acting like you the only woman who's been through something. Stop acting like you the victim every single time. Kirk made choices too. He ain't no saint, but you always painting me like the villain, when all I did was fall in love with a man who lied to both of us." And suddenly the room fell into stunned silence, because no one had ever heard Kendra speak so openly, so bluntly about her pain. And for a brief moment, even Rasheeda's rage softened, her eyes narrowing but her lips parting just slightly as if she was caught off guard by the vulnerability. Yet it didn't last, because the audience in the studio, the castmates watching from the sidelines, and the fans following every leaked clip online all knew that Rasheeda wasn't about to let someone else control the narrative. And she quickly snapped back, her voice sharp like glass, "Fall in love. That's your excuse. That's your justification for disrespecting another woman, for stepping into a marriage like it was a revolving door." And Kirk finally lost his cool, standing up so fast his chair toppled behind him with a crash, shouting, "Stop it, both of y'all. Stop putting it all on each other. When I'm the one who messed this up, when I'm the one who should have been honest, when I'm the one who caused this whole damn mess." And for the first time, both women froze, their eyes locked on Kirk as he confessed with trembling hands, "I can't keep watching y'all fight over me like I'm some prize, like I'm worth destroying yourselves for, because the truth is, I've been selfish, I've been greedy, and I've been letting y'all tear each other apart so I don't have to face what I've done." Which sent shockwaves through the set, because fans had been begging for Kirk to finally admit his guilt. And now, in this heated, chaotic moment, he laid it bare. But instead of easing the tension, it only twisted the knife deeper, because Rasheeda turned away from him with tears stinging her eyes, whispering to herself but loud enough for the cameras, "All these years, all this loyalty, and that's all I get." An admission when the damage is already done, while Kendra, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths, crossed her arms and muttered, "And now what, Kirk? Now we just pick up the pieces you left." As if the weight of his words had opened wounds she had tried so hard to bury. And the producers leaned in closer, urging the cameramen to capture every single flicker of emotion, because this was the climax they didn't see coming, the unraveling that no script could have written better. And as the studio audience roared with mixed boos and cheers, fans online were already flooding social media with divided opinions, some siding with Rasheeda, praising her strength and calling Kendra a home, while others defended Kendra, arguing she too was a victim of Kirk's lies and manipulation. And hashtags began trending within minutes. Hashtag Team Rasheeda clashing with hashtag Team Kendra. As the internet turned the personal wreckage of these three lives into a battlefield of opinions, memes and viral clips, yet inside the set, away from the digital noise, the human weight of betrayal, pain, and anger hung heavy in the air, with Rasheeda staring at Kirk as if seeing him for the first time. Kendra's fists clenched at her sides, and Kirk himself burying his face in his hands, whispering brokenly, "I don't know how to fix this," as the cameras zoomed in to catch every raw detail of the moment that would soon dominate headlines, blogs, and fan debates. A moment that proved no matter how many times this family tried to patch things up, the cracks kept widening, threatening to swallow them whole. The silence that followed Kirk's broken whisper stretched across the set like a suffocating fog, and even though the cameras kept rolling and the crew exchanged frantic glances, no one dared to interrupt the raw, unfolding wreckage of emotions, because this wasn't just another scripted scene for entertainment. This was a collision of years of love, betrayal, ego, and resentment all crashing together in one place. And as Rasheeda's eyes glistened under the hot studio lights, she finally exhaled a shaky breath, her voice low but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Fix it, Kirk. You can't fix a house that's already burned to the ground. You can only stand in the ashes and admit you lit the match." And those words, heavy and poetic in their pain, drew another wave of gasps from the audience, while Kendra's jaw tightened, her arms uncrossing as she stepped forward, her heels clicking on the stage floor like warning shots, and she spat, "Don't you dare act like you were the only one betrayed, Rasheeda. Don't you dare act like your pain is the only one that matters. Because while you were crying over broken promises, I was crying over a man who swore I was his future, only to find out I was just his excuse to escape the life he wasn't brave enough to leave." And suddenly the raw truth of both women's experiences collided, painting Kirk not as a victim, not as a pawn, but as the architect of this emotional battlefield. And he staggered back, his hands trembling, muttering, "I never wanted it like this. I never wanted y'all to feel like this." But the crowd didn't buy it, booing and hissing, their voices echoing the judgment of millions of fans already typing furious comments online, because for once the world seemed united in its condemnation of Kirk, while still deeply divided over which woman deserved more sympathy. And Rasheeda, her shoulders shaking, turned to Kendra with an unexpected spark in her eyes, not of hatred but of recognition, whispering, "Maybe we both played ourselves. Maybe we both believed in a man who didn't know how to love anybody but himself." And, though the words were meant to bridge a gap, they instead widened it, because Kendra recoiled, snapping, "Don't lump me in with you. Don't make me part of your narrative, because at least I didn't stay for decades pretending it was fine. At least I didn't sell my pride for the illusion of a family." And the brutality of that line cut Rasheeda to her core, the studio reacting with gasps so loud they drowned the hum of the lights. And Kirk lunged forward as if to physically shield Rasheeda from the blow, but she pushed him back with a force that surprised even herself, shouting, "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me," after standing here letting her spit on everything I've been through. And in that moment it became clear to everyone that this wasn't going to be resolved with apologies or hugs. This was going to spiral further into chaos, because the wounds were too deep, the egos too big, and the pain too fresh. And as security inched closer, ready to intervene if things turned physical, the producers whispered urgently through headsets, "Keep rolling, don't cut. This is it. This is the moment that makes the season." And indeed it was, because online the drama was exploding in real time, with fans dissecting every facial expression, every shaky breath, and every venom-laced word. Memes already flooding timelines of Rasheeda glaring, Kendra pointing, and Kirk collapsing in guilt, while commentators speculated on whether this public implosion would mean the end of Kirk and Rasheeda's long, complicated marriage or the start of a shocking alliance between Rasheeda and Kendra against him. But back on set, Rasheeda's voice cracked as she turned away from both of them, whispering to no one in particular, "I gave him my youth, my loyalty, my everything, and he gave me humiliation on repeat." And Kendra, though she tried, to steel herself, flinched at the rawness of the confession, because deep down she knew the truth. She too had been humiliated, she too had been strung along, and maybe in some twisted way they were both casualties of the same man's inability to be honest. But pride wouldn't let her admit it. Pride kept her voice sharp as she snapped back, "You should have walked away, Rasheeda, but you stayed because you liked the image. You liked the story of being the strong wife who endured. You liked being the symbol of survival. And now you mad because the mask slipped and people see the cracks. and those words struck like daggers, leaving Rasheeda visibly trembling, her hands clutching the edge of the table as if she needed it to anchor herself, and Kirk, overwhelmed, dropped to his knees in front of both women, his voice breaking as he cried, "Please, please stop, I can't keep watching this. I can't keep seeing the people I love tear each other apart because of me." But instead of calming things down, his desperate display fueled another firestorm, with Rasheeda sneering, "Love, you don't love, Kirk, you consume, you drain, you take until there's nothing left. And then you move on to the next person who makes you feel like a man," while Kendra muttered bitterly, "And I was fool enough to think I was the last stop, the one who could change you," and for the first time their voices overlapped, echoing each other's heartbreak, creating a haunting harmony of betrayed women united in pain but divided in pride. And the cameras zoomed in close to capture Kirk's tear-streaked face, his body shaking as he tried to speak but no words came. And that silence said more than any apology ever could. It painted him as small, broken, and utterly powerless in the storm he created, while the audience erupted into chants, some shouting Rasheeda, others shouting Kendra, the room literally splitting into sides. Fans waving their arms and choosing their allegiances as if this were a gladiator arena, while millions online mirrored the chaos, threads of arguments spiraling into thousands of comments, TikTok edits turning the confrontation into viral clips, and bloggers writing headlines like "Rasheeda finally snaps" and "Kendra's raw confession changes everything." The story dominating entertainment news feeds as if it were a national scandal. And all the while, on that set, the three central figures stood at the eye of the hurricane, broken, furious, and exposed, the weight of years of lies, compromises, and illusions pressing down on them. And even as producers finally stepped in, gently urging them to take a break, to breathe, to regroup, it was clear to everyone that nothing would ever be the same after this day. Because the wounds weren't just reopened, they were ripped wider than ever before, leaving the question hanging in the air like smoke after an explosion. When the cameras stop rolling, when the audience goes home, and when the hashtags die down, will Rasheeda, Kendra, and Kirk be able to live with the wreckage they left on display for the world to see? Or will this be the fracture that finally breaks them all beyond repair? And just like that, we've reached the boiling point of one of the most explosive showdowns reality TV has ever seen. But let's be honest, what we've just witnessed is so much more than a simple argument. It's a collision of love, betrayal, pride, and survival that left fans absolutely stunned. Think about it, Rasheeda didn't just defend her pride, she dragged Kendra straight into the fire with words sharp enough to split steel, reminding everyone that she's not just a wife, not just a survivor, but a woman tired of being disrespected. On the other side, Kendra unleashed a side we've never seen before, pushing back with raw honesty, laying out her pain, and demanding the world recognize that she too is a victim of Kirk's twisted web. And Kirk finally confessed what fans have been waiting years to hear, but instead of mending wounds, his words only made the fractures bleed wider, leaving the family and the fanbase even more divided. So here's the question that has everybody talking. Where do they go from here? Will Rasheeda finally walk away for good, closing the chapter on decades of hurt? Or will Kirk find yet another way to convince her to stay, repeating the same cycle that has broken her time and time again? And what about Kendra? Will she step back with her dignity intact? Or will she fight harder to claim her place in Kirk's life, no matter the cost? These are the questions burning through social media right now. And fans everywhere are choosing sides in a battle that seems to have no winners. But now, we want to hear from you. Whose side are you on? Are you riding with Rasheeda, the woman who has endured betrayal but continues to stand tall? Or do you sympathize with Kendra, who found herself caught in a love triangle she never truly signed up for? And let's not forget Kirk. Can a man so broken by his own mistakes ever truly redeem himself? Or has he crossed the line for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your voice is part of this story. Your opinion adds fuel to the fire that keeps this conversation alive. And if this drama shook you the way it shook us, make sure to smash that like button right now. Every like tells us you want more of these deep dives into the wildest reality TV chaos. Every tap helps push this story further into the spotlight where it belongs. And if you're new here, and you're just now catching the fire, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because trust me, the drama doesn't stop here. There are more confrontations, more secrets, and more shocking twists waiting around the corner, and you don't want to miss a single one. Think about how quickly this moment went viral, the hashtags, the memes, the endless debates flooding time. This isn't just entertainment, this is a cultural moment, and by subscribing, you're locking yourself in with a community that lives for these moments. A family that analyzes every detail, every look, every slip of the tongue to uncover the truth beneath the drama. So why just watch when you can join in, be part of the conversation, be part of the movement? Because together we're not just watching reality TV, we're shaping how it's remembered. And before you go, let's leave you with one final thought. This story is far from over. As the dust settles and the cameras shut down, the real battles begin, the ones behind closed doors, away from the lights, where choices are made that change lives forever. Will Rasheeda find her peace? Will Kendra claim her power? Will Kirk ever learn the true meaning of accountability? The answers are coming, and when they do, you'll want to be right here with us, ready to break it all down piece by piece. So don't wait, like the video, comment your raw, unfiltered opinion, and subscribe for the next chapter in this wild ride. The stage has been set, the players have been exposed, and the drama has only just begun. Stay tuned, stay locked in, and remember, when it comes to reality TV, truth is stranger than fiction, and we're here to bring you every jaw-dropping second of it.